That night, the wind was very strong, so strong that several tall maize stalks fell over and some broke. "Don't worry, Granddad John," said Sophie. "I can help." "I'm so glad you're here," he replied. "We can earth up the fallen stalks together." "Earth up?" asked Sophie. "Yes, that's when we pile up the earth around the base of the stems and firm it down. It helps to keep the stems upright." So Sophie gathered the dead leaves and Granddad John cut the broken stalks into little pieces. "We'll put it all on the compost heap," he said. 1 cob of corn, 10 cherry tomatoes, 1 tomato, 1 plum tomato, 2 different lettuce leaves. When Granddad John had harvested lots of vegetables, he put them in his red van and drove to the local market. Sophie loved going with him. "But where do the vegetables in the supermarket come from?" asked Sophie. "They come from the big fields you can see over there. There are thousands of potatoes in one field. They are harvested early in the morning, taken to the towns in lorries, and stacked into supermarket boxes. Other vegetables go to Mr. Patron's factory where they are preserved in jars." "And what happens in that building over there?" "That's where they grow endives. Endives grow in the cold and the dark because light makes them go green and taste bitter," explained Granddad John. "Brr. I'm glad I don't have to work in there," said Sophie. "I like the sun too much." In September, Sophie went back to school in the city, but she soon visited her grandparents again. The vegetable garden looked very different. Sophie helped her grandma cut Brussels sprouts. "They look funny," she said, "like little cabbages on a stalk." "That's because they're the buds of the cabbage plant," Grandma explained. "This evening, we'll eat them with some of the tasty sausages. Now it's starting to get cold. Let's hang up a fat ball and seeds for the birds. All sorts of birds will come and peck at them. There are no insects to eat in winter, so they get very hungry." "I'll climb up to hang it," offered Sophie. Sophie noticed a strange-looking leek. "Grandma," she cried, "it's covered in red spots, as if he got measles." "Oh dear," said Grandma. "It has a rust disease. We'd better pull it up quickly." A shy hedgehog was hiding under the red cabbages. It had spotted some fat, tasty slugs, which it would eat as soon as Sophie and her grandma left. Gardeners love hedgehogs because they eat slugs and snails. 2 leeks, 1 green cabbage leaf, 5 Brussels sprouts, half a red cabbage. It was a very cold night, but that didn't stop the gardeners from heading out the next day, wrapped up warm. Granddad John used a fork to dig up Jerusalem artichokes, pulling hard on the stalks. Sophie gathered some crunchy green lamb's lettuce, then replaced the plunk of wood that had been protecting them. She was very proud of her many salad plants. A big celeriac root was keeping warm under this bed of straw, and the endives, which would soon poke their noses out of the earth, were still hidden underground. Every 3 years, Granddad John dug fertilizer into the earth to add nutrients, so the vegetables would grow better. The fertilizer was made from straw mixed with horse manure. Granddad John didn't mind the smell, but Sophie held her nose and ran away. 3 Jerusalem artichokes, 1 endive, 3 pieces of lamb's lettuce, 1 celeriac root. There was lots to do in the vegetable garden before winter came, so Sophie came back one weekend to lend a hand. They had to clean the stakes and canes and store them in the shed. They had to pull up any dead stems and tomato plants and burn them. Granddad John had to sow a special crop that would stay in the ground all winter. In the spring, he would plow it into the earth to make it richer. He called it a green cover crop. Now that Sophie and her grandparents had finished their jobs, the garden, covered in snow, could rest until spring. Before she went home, Sophie tidied her tools in the shed and said goodbye to the neighbors. After a wonderful year, she felt sad to be leaving the vegetable garden, the village, and especially her grandparents. But Granddad John had a surprise to help Sophie feel better. Back at home, in the first days of spring sunshine, Sophie and her best friend Victor opened the present from her grandparents. What a lovely surprise. It was full of packets of vegetable and herb seeds. We can grow plants, just like in the country, Sophie laughed. John had drawn a picture of a sun on some packets, which meant this plant needs sunlight. Victor's window faced south and got lots of sun, but Sophie's balcony had a mixture of sun and shade. The two friends divided up the seeds, but what could they plant them in? With their parents' help, they brought big pots and planters, bags of earth, and canes. Once the seeds were sowed, they waited and watered regularly and waited some more. After a few weeks, the radishes appeared and other vegetables and herbs followed. Sophie and Victor's friends came around to see and taste them, and decided they wanted to grow vegetables on their windowsill as well. Now Sophie had her very own garden. Victor made an omelet from all the delicious herbs and added edible flower petals to a salad. Scrumptious. The end.